Hi, this is my video about sacred sciences and all the connections I've made. I want to edit it more and fix it up and probably add more stuff, but I'll do that some other time.
I opened it randomly, if there is such a thing. And when I did, this graphic, this is not my graphic, this graphic was on the page. A tetrahedron within a sphere. Well, I had spent by then a very long time coming up with the idea that a tetrahedron and a sphere must be part of the geometry of reality. And it was the base of my theory. And to find this in a book that talked about ancient knowledge was crazy. I'm like, oh my God, they beat me to it by 2,000 years. Dang, I was going to copyright this. And I was like, oh, what's that doing there? And, you know, there was a whole elaboration about the relationship of a tetrahedron to a sphere, showing that a tetrahedron has a very interesting relationship to the sphere, where it intersects the sphere at exactly 2/3 down, 1/3 up, if one point is on the south, or if one point is on the north, then 2/3 up and 1/3 down. And it intersects the sphere at exactly 19.471222064 latitude, which is exactly where I live, actually. I live on the big island of Hawaii, and that is on one of those points. And I was puzzled. How did that get in there? Did somebody listen to my thoughts? But I realized that this graphic was the result of a paper that had been published by an American engineer that had been hired to survey the huge city, ancient city of Teotihuacan, near Mexico City. This is where there's the moon pyramid and the sun pyramid and the way of the dead and all this stuff. His name was Hugh Holliston Jr., and the paper was published by the American Health Society after 20 years of him putting, surveying all of the buildings there. Well, when Hugh Holliston Jr. started to survey the buildings at that ancient city, he found something very bizarre. He found that all the buildings there seems to, like the large buildings, the temples and such, seems to be in the exact appropriate place to describe all the orbits of our solar system.
The site's astronomical alignments have been studied for over 50 years by Hugh Harliston. Harliston believes there's a code to be deciphered at Teotihuacan, to do with the scale and dimensions of the buildings.
3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Harliston did exhaustive surveys throughout the site and in the local surroundings. How much measuring did you do?
Oh, I did 9,000 out here in this valley.
9,000
measurements.
Harliston believes he's cracked the code used by the builders of Teotihuacan. His surveys reveal the standard unit of measure used to design the great monuments.
STU means Standard Teotihuacan Unit.
Right.
So I found out you take the French meter, this one, and you add this little piece.
Right.
This little piece is 6 centimeters. It's really 5.9.
Harliston's surveys have been carried out with impeccable professionalism, and his unit of measure reveals that a network of repeating numbers is woven into the design of Teotihuacan. He's proved conclusively that dimensions of the citadel represent the circumference of the Earth on a scale of exactly 100,000 to 1, and that the side of its main structure represents the radius of the Earth. All over the site, his measurements confirm that the builders must somehow have measured the Earth.
I don't know how they measured it. Nobody can figure it out, I believe. It's pretty tough.
And when you apply this measure to this site, everything suddenly falls into place? Is that what happened?
Yes. I began to see it was not only east to west, north to south, it was up and down. I found that there was some reason why they were marking the mountains with elevations that fit the system. When they draw a line, they're telling you an area. When they draw an area, they're telling you a volume. When they put volume, they're telling you time.
What Harleston's saying is that there are measurements of time in the dimensions of the building, which are connected with the revolution of the Earth. Because the Earth turns at a fixed speed, we can measure distance with time. One is directly proportional to the other. This suggests a fantastically sophisticated knowledge on the part of the builders.
It does. It's high precision astronomy. But the thing about this place is the space measurements and the time measurements unify. Once you know the basic measure that repeats, you can find it in Egypt, you can find it in Stonehenge, you can find it in Tiwanaku, Bolivia, you can find it
all over the world.
All over the world.
Yeah. This would then suggest a common source.
Yes.
And he found that there was some incredible mathematical recurrence in all of the measurements that he was taking. And that recurrence, these mathematics that kept on creeping up, were always the same. And he figured out that they were pointing out to the mathematics of a sphere and a tetrahedron embedded in it, saying that if these people were trying to communicate something to us, they were trying to tell us about a sphere and a tetrahedron. That even that city, right beside Mexico City, that ancient city, is exactly at 19.47 latitude on the Earth as well. So not only does it have the mathematics of a tetrahedron in a sphere in all of its layouts, but as well it is placed on the Earth exactly where a tetrahedron would intersect a sphere. Imagine that there is a fundamental structure to the vacuum, that there is a fundamental structure to reality. You would expect that throughout the ages we would have come up with it, because it would be inherent in us. It would be oozing out of us. But I knew there was something wrong, because a tetrahedron on its own is not in equilibrium. The isotropic vector metric from Buckminster Fuller. He said that the mathematical constant that he got from his surveying of that ancient city pointed out to the square root of 9/8, which is the mathematical constant for an isotropic vector metric generated by Buckminster Fuller. However, many of the things that Bucky came up with were later confirmed.
Pi is equal to 3.141592653589747, etc., etc., etc.
The master egghead of them all.
Pythagoras.
The father of mathematics and music.
Mathematics and music?
Ah, you'll find mathematics in the darndest places. Watch. First, we'll need a string. Stretch it good and tight, plunk it. Now divide in half. Plunk again. You see? It's the same tone, one octave higher. Now divide the next section. And the next. Pythagoras discovered the octave had a ratio of 2 to 1. With simple fractions, he got this. And from this harmony in numbers developed the musical scale of today.
By golly, you do find mathematics in the darndest places.
You can imagine how excited Pythagoras was when he shared his findings with his pals, a fraternity of eggheads, known as the Pythagoreans. They used to meet in secret to discuss their mathematical discoveries. Only members were allowed to attend. They had a secret emblem, the pentagram. Let's see what the topic is for today.
What's going on?
It's a jam session.
Give me something with a beat.
Shh. So from these eggheads, the Pythagoreans, with their mathematical formula, came the basis of our music of today.
Pythagoras, boy, put it down. Well, I'll be a postman fan.
It was our old friend Pythagoras who discovered that the pentagram was full of mathemagic. The two shorter lines combined exactly equal the third. And this line shows the magic proportions of the famous golden section. The second and third lines exactly equal the fourth. Once again, we have the golden section. But this is only the beginning. Hidden within the pentagram is a secret for creating a golden rectangle, which the Greeks admired for its beautiful proportions and magic qualities. The star contains the golden rectangle many times over. It's a most remarkable shape. It can mathematically reproduce itself indefinitely. All these rectangles have exactly the same proportions. This figure also contains a magic spiral that repeats the proportions of the golden section into infinity. To the Greeks, the golden rectangle represented a mathematical law of beauty. We find it in their classical architecture. The Parthenon, perhaps one of the most famous of early Greek buildings, contains many golden rectangles. These same golden proportions are also found in their sculpture. In the centuries that followed, the golden rectangle dominated the idea of beauty in architecture throughout the Western world. The Cathedral of Notre Dame is an outstanding example. The Renaissance painters knew this secret well. Today, the golden rectangle is very much a part of our modern world. Modern painters have rediscovered the magic of these proportions. Indeed, this ideal proportion is to be found in life itself.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy. This is mathematics. I got mathematical figures like that.
Donald.
Get me to it.
No.
Ideal proportion.
Not quite. No, I'm afraid not. Well, we can't all be mathematically perfect.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, I knew I could do it.
Now that you're all pent up in a pentagon, let's see how nature uses this same mathematical form, the petunia, the star jasmine, the starfish, the wax flower, there are literally thousands of members in good standing in nature's Pythagorean Society of the Star. All nature's works have a mathematical logic, and her patterns are limitless. The magic proportions of the golden section are often found in the spirals of nature's designs. The profusion of mathematical forms brings to mind the words of Pythagoras. Everything is arranged according to number and mathematical shape. Yes, there is mathematics in music, in art, in just about everything. And as the Greeks had guessed, the rules are always the same. This game is played with circles and triangles. Think of a perfect circle. A perfect circle. Perfect circle. Perfect. Put a triangle inside and turn it. Now spin the circle. And what have you got?
A ball.
Yes, a sphere. The shape of things is first discovered in the mind. Slice off the top, and we have a
magnifying glass.
That's right. A lens is a section of a sphere. All optical instruments are created through mathematics. You see, there's a lot more to mathematics than just numbers and equations. Let's get back to our circle and triangle. Roll it, and we have a
wheel.
The circle has been the basis for many of man's important inventions. The mind can create the most amazing things. If we spin the triangle, we have a
Cone.
Slice the cone. The cone is full of useful mathematical shapes. Slice it again. Slice it several times. The orbits of all planets and satellites can be found in the cone. No matter how you slice it, it's always mathematics. A slice like this gives us the reflector of a searchlight. A slice like this, the mirror of a giant telescope. A line on a cone, and we have a drill. And a spring. Now you're ticking.
Number, please.
The mind is the birthplace for all of man's scientific achievements. The mind knows no limits when used properly. Think of a pentagram, Donald. Now put another inside, a third, and a fourth. No pencil is sharp enough to draw as fine as you can think, and no paper large enough to hold your imagination. In fact, it is only in the mind that we can conceive infinity. Mathematical thinking has opened the doors to the exciting adventures of science.
I'll be doggone. I've never seen so many doors before.
Each discovery leads to many others, an endless chain.
What's the matter with these doors? Hey! These doors won't open. They're locked.
Of course they are locked. These are the doors of the future, and the key is
Mathematics.
right. Mathematics. The boundless treasures of science are locked behind those doors. In time, they will be opened by the curious and inquiring minds of future generations. In the words of Galileo, mathematics is the alphabet with which God has written the universe.
But the blueprint of the universe he taught was the isotropic vector metric. What is this thing? It's 10 tetrahedron on the bottom. This is called a 4-frequency isotropic vector metric. So 10 tetrahedrons on the bottom, 3 in the middle. 6 in the middle, 3 on top, and then 1, making a huge tetrahedron on its own. Can everybody see this? So there's actually 20 tetrahedron in an isotropic vector metric. An octahedron is a pyramid with another one below it. Emphasis on the word pyramid. So I was happy to find that the pyramidal geometry was present between the tetrahedrons. Can everybody see how an octahedron is 2 pyramids base to base? If this is one point of the pyramid, then the base is here, and it's a square base. It looks rectangular because it's in perspective. And the other point is here, right? 2 pyramid base to base. There was something weird in the middle of the metric, because the metric is called isotropic. So you would expect that it would be always in balance. So there was a bunch of these, there was 4 of these tetrahedrons completely out of place, creating a symmetry in the middle of symmetry. Now I knew this had to be incomplete, because if this was the fundamental structure of the vacuum, it had to be isotropic and symmetric so that you would have perfect equilibrium. The isotropic vector metric had to be modified. I didn't know how. One thing I was sure of is that the universe is polarized, so that it had to be 2. I have a problem, because the 2 mirroring each other, base to base, don't make a sphere. And you push one isotropic vector metric into the other so that you generate a perfect sphere, then the central geometry is a vector equilibrium, the only geometry in full equilibrium in all vectorial possibility. And there is no distortion, because those 4 tetrahedrons that were in the isotropic vector metrics alone were there to accept the reverse one, so that the one isotropic vector metric was missing its better half. And when the 2 came together, it created equilibrium. This is beautifully metaphorically and beautiful for what I'm trying to achieve: the geometry of equilibrium, the geometry of the vacuum. And I could see how the male and the females coming together generates a new point of center, a new being. And so it was just beautiful. It was metaphorically beautiful, but in the physics of what I was trying to achieve, it was exactly going in the direction I wanted it to go. And I realized that the vector equilibrium had to be fundamental to the structure of space. You have a vector going in one direction, and that vector has a certain length. We'll call the length of the vector its force. So longer it is, stronger it is, shorter it is, weaker it is. Okay? In order to get equilibrium, you would have to have a vector in the exact opposite direction with exactly the same length. But that's a weak equilibrium because you'd have to nail that vector so that it would be a perfect alignment here. Otherwise you would miss equilibrium, and any forces pushing down in any other direction would break the equilibrium. It's very precarious. So how would you increase stability? You'd probably add vectors at 90-degree angle from those. Now you increase equilibrium, right? However, the edge of your geometry has longer vectors than the vectors to the center. Because they're longer, they're stronger, and thus your geometry explodes. It doesn't work. What would you do to try to correct it? Probably add vectors at 45-degree angles from these other ones. But if you did that, then the edge vectors are shorter than the vectors to the center. The geometry implodes. You still don't have equilibrium. So what's the solution? The solution is the hexagon. Because the hexagon has edge vectors that are the exact same length as the vectors to the center. It's the only geometry that does that. So now you have equilibrium. And what does that look like in 3D? It looks like a vector equilibrium. This geometry here. Oh. Okay. Vector equilibrium. It's 8 tetrahedrons pointing inwards. Now, this can be seen as well as 4 hexagons intersecting each other. You see that? The red one on the edge, there's a blue one at the equator, and then 2 ones intersecting in the middle. 4 hexagons intersecting, creating equilibrium at the center, or singularity. And note that there is 12 vectors radiating from the vector equilibrium. So there's 12 vectors radiating from the center, and there's 12 edge vectors, 24 vectors. These numbers are found in most ancient civilization texts. 12, 24, and so on are found everywhere. The 12 angels with singularity in the middle, the 12 apostles with Emmanuel in the middle, the singularity, and so on. The 24 elders in Kabbalistic traditions, and so on. The vector equilibrium in the middle had all of its octahedrons filled. That means that when the vector equilibrium is in the middle, the pyramidal structures are completed with octahedrons. But the edge octahedrons were incomplete. So I still had a symmetry. I'm noticing that some of the faces of the octahedrons are not covered. So it's asymmetric. So I decided I have to keep adding tetrahedrons till I gain symmetry. And to cover all of the faces, I had to add 24 tetrahedrons to the ones that were already there. So this is one isotropic vector metric is 20. The other one is 20. That's 40 plus 24. 40 plus 24 was 64 tetrahedron metric. The 64 tetrahedron metric is a match to many, many things. I'm going to give you a hint. There is 64 codons that generate the 20 amino acids of your DNA structure. Okay? Now, when I found the 64 tetrahedron grid, then I realized that that was the quanta in which symmetry was present everywhere, and equilibrium was truly generated at the center. But what got me really excited is that I realized what I had built. What I had built was a fractal structure, just like the 2D fractal structure I showed you at the beginning, but this one in full 3D spherical coordinates. The only true fractal 3D spherical coordinate that you will find. Can everybody see the vector equilibrium on the inside and then the vector equilibrium on the outside? This continues to grow to infinity. And I could see that the inside vector equilibrium, its radius is exactly half the radius of the one on the outside. So the geometry grows in fractals, but not only does it grow in fractals, the fractals are perfect octaves. You see? And so I got really excited. It's like, oh my God, here it is. The structure of the vacuum. Equilibrium to infinity. Infinitely big to infinitely small. And then I noticed further that how this was constructed is constructed this way. Let me see if I can let go of some of this stuff. Actually, I'm going to leave that. I realized what I had built. I had built a matrix based on 8 star tetrahedrons, each having 8 tetrahedron in it. Okay? All coming together towards the center to generate the star, the 64 tetrahedron grid. But when it did, the 8 stars coming together, okay, here you're only going to see 6, plus the one in front, and then there's one in the back you won't see. So the 8 stars coming together generates the vector equilibrium in the middle. Why is this significant? 8 star tetrahedron is made out of 8 tetrahedron pointing outward, radiation, coming together to generate the vector equilibrium, which is 8 tetrahedron coming towards the center, generating contraction. So now, not only did I have found the geometry of equilibrium, but I had found the only fractal 3D metric, and it generated expansion and contraction. Exactly all the axioms I had placed for myself when I started this investigation of the geometry of space. And then something really weird happened. I knew I had the fundamental structure of space. I knew you know, I was definitely seeing, now realize, you guys, if we truly have the fundamental structure of creation, then technology that's based on this information is going to tap directly into an infinite potential of energy, infinite potential of gravity, infinite potential of rejuvenation, regeneration, and so on. Okay? Now, I know you guys, crop circles, There's scientific papers that were just published in peer-reviewed journals about crop circles, because many of them are not being able to be explained by people going in the fields at night and stomping around, Doug and Dave drinking moonshine and freaking everybody out. Some of them are not easily explained, and actually papers have just been published in peer-reviewed journals saying that this might be a new source of energy. But the croppies that I'm talking about decided in 1997 that if somebody was trying to talk to us through the crop circles, maybe we should talk back. So they went in the crop circles and they wrote in big letters by stomping around with their boots, what do we need to know? Good question. And the next crop circle that occurred was the largest crop circle to date at that time, and this one. Have we seen this somewhere? This is everything we've been talking about this morning. What do we need to know? Well, that's really nice. They give us this. They even made it in a way that's not reproducible by Doug and Dave drinking moonshine. Because all the hay is woven in a way that it makes effects of light and shadow that gives the vertices, the edges of 3D tetrahedrons. The largest today, it was much larger than anything previous to that, and it was interestingly situated near ancient, sacred site. Was another iteration of the same thing. So they were insisting on the pattern. What do we need to know? You guys get it? Look at tetrahedral fractal geometry. Right? How do you fit infinity in a finite space? Note that on these fractal curves, although there's not a boundary around the whole thing, the boundary is implied because the circles are all there of the smaller boundaries of the fractal. I got a picture of that part in the middle, and I realized what it was. It's the exact same geometry, but this one going inwards, towards infinitely small. This is actually telling us everything we need to know about the structure of reality, the structure, the physics of creation. And that's according to my theory. I was mind blown. But then on top of it, they made it so nice that you could actually overlay the 14 octahedron cavities that are generated by the 64 tetrahedron grid right on top of it, and you get a very nice match. So, and then since then, it's been going berserk. There's been 64 tetrahedron crop circles occurring. Look at the precision. Again, right beside an ancient site. Stone site with an enormous stone that was placed on top of another. And sure enough, when you overlay the 64 tetrahedron grid, you get a perfect match. This is not trivial. Okay? When you continue to explore the crop circles, this one is really interesting. It was thought to be, by one of the famous psychics, the most important crop circle ever to occur. And because it's really simple, everybody went, huh? There's other crop circle much more interesting. But in fact, if you look carefully, that crop circle is a 2D representation of a 3D vector equilibrium. And in this crop circle, it gives you singularity in the middle, and it tells you that each tetrahedron generates the sphere, the radiative side of the equation. But then, if you take that sphere around each tetrahedron and you add the other ones of the other tetrahedrons, you get this symbol, the seed of life, known as the seed of life or popularized as the seed of life. That is a symbol that is found in many, many ancient civilization walls as well. And then they give you a crop circle to tell you you've decoded it right. And they insist. Here is your intersecting spheres. Note torque, rotation.
Here we are at Saqqara. This is the famous step pyramid of Giza. Giza is a title to the king of the third dynasty, 2900 BC, roughly, said the books. The step pyramid is located in a big courtyard, much, much older than the pyramid itself.
We see the remains of a quartz floor at Giza, in the temple to the east of the second pyramid.
Now I'm pointing the jade pillar, which is symbolizing one of the ancient gods, Osiris. And jade is the word we still use to address the older people, like grandmother and grandfather, jade. I'm going to take you now to see that hospital, the healing with the sound.
Stories about ancient healing techniques were passed down from generation to generation by the elders. Hakim explains how sound played a part in diagnosing and healing patients.
That line of construction you see like 3 chambers, it's what's left of the house of the spirit. And it's a healing system with a sound. It's a medical investigation table. And the patient have the right to use either side of the stairs. One on the right, one on the left. So he have to follow, or she have to follow her own antenna to climb up there and choose the point where she stands. Because each point is connected to a cheek chamber. We have 22 of them, 11 on each side, no ceiling. And when you go inside, you can see a niche where the physician put his head in the niche to see what's the matter with his patient laying on this table. And that works with the sound. And the sound source is running water in a tunnel underneath here. So it's a big map of tunnels underneath here.
Let's consider that the pyramid sites along the Band of Peace are sophisticated harmonic structures, not only mirroring positions of the stars, but designed to replicate harmonic cavities of the human body. It seems that the chambers in the pyramids are harmonically tuned to a specific frequency or musical tone. Sound healing techniques were used to restore the patient's body to the correct harmonic within. Is it possible to confirm this energy through scientific means?
What I've been finding in the last 20 years of research, a lot of experiments have been done that show that there's a certain type of energy that does not exist in our current science. It's unknown with our current science. We call it subtle energy.
Well, this is a whole new trend of thought in looking at ancient structures, that maybe the ancients understood subtle energies.
So this appears to be a technology that may have existed in megalithic societies. You know, these societies that built things out of big stones.
It makes sense that you could motivate an entire population to invest so heavily in building these structures, I think. And I don't mean to say by any means that this is the only purpose of the megaliths, but I think it's pretty clear that it's at least one of the primary or one of the important purposes for building these structures.
You find megalithic sites everywhere around the world, and there's a tendency to make circles or certain types of formations.
Megalithic sites occur all over the world. Is their placement random, or does the location of these sites reveal yet another hidden layer of ancient knowledge?
One thing I've found looking at different megalithic structures over a few continents in numerous places around the world, overwhelmingly these places, the pyramids, the Stonehenges, etc. of the world, were placed on ground where an unusual type of geology naturally concentrates the regular daily natural electromagnetic fluctuations that occur everywhere on the Earth each day.
If you go into England, for example, the ley lines that cross England, the Michael line, which is hundreds of miles long, that crosses England, that carries this energy along that line.
It will therefore generate electric currents in the land called telluric currents in the straight geological sense of that word. And those occur everywhere on the planet.
We know that this ley energy, this subtle energy, passes along these lines.
There are certain special types of geology that will magnify those several-fold. And that's where we found the megalith builders preferred to put their monuments.
And typically where lines cross, where you have more than one line intersecting, temples were often built.
These are called conductivity discontinuities, which sounds highly technical, but it's merely the place where one area of ground that has a good ability to conduct electricity meets another area of ground that has a lesser ability to conduct these natural electric currents.
The Chinese had the same tradition. They call them dragon lines. It was illegal for a commoner to be buried on such a line. A king had to be buried on such a line. They put palaces there. There's a whole series of sacred sites. They're always built on lines like this.
I want to say in this area about the location of temple. You have to have a symbols appear on the ground. When it's seen, then this is the place where people naturally come to get more healthy energy from that spot. You know, energy pumps from the earth.
Nikola Tesla sought to provide the world with free wireless electricity for everybody on Earth. He discovered that electricity occurred naturally throughout the Earth's atmosphere and ground. The telluric currents in the ground that John Burke discussed, and the electricity present in the ionosphere in the atmosphere, which is ionized by the sun. He also created and developed ways to harness those energies.
Tesla, who teach Nikola Tesla to get to that power of electricity? And he didn't invent it, it's already there, but he know how to use it. And not only that, he did not take an advantage like Mr. Edison.
Tesla wanted to harness the natural energy that exists everywhere on Earth and make it free to the public. Edison endeavored to produce and distribute electricity by creating a regulated monopoly for profit.
He became rich and the people more light into their home. Yeah, so Nikola Tesla, he's the one think of how to use this energy.
Between 1901 and 1917, the Tesla Tower was built on Long Island as a wireless broadcasting system for telephone and electrical signals. Interestingly, it was constructed on an aquifer with descending passageways and tunnels beneath it. At the time, few understood how it worked. Tesla's funding was ultimately dropped by J.P. Morgan because Tesla wanted the wireless electricity to be free, and therefore J.P. Morgan couldn't make a profit. So even though Tesla's genius was seen by many, he was still driven into obscurity. The energy to create free wireless energy has always existed on our planet and still exists today.
And it's not the only energy on our planet, there's plenty. Rivers are flow by energy, tsunami is energy, frequencies are energy. If we have the electricity now, it's based on explosion energy. Now, the sound energy based on a technology different from the explosion energy, and it's known as implosion energy.
This energy was not the kind of energy that we have that pollutes. It was a completely passive energy that had no byproducts.
The energy we use today is generated by combustion and is non-renewable. It is called explosion energy and leaves exhaust and pollution.
Our system all over the planet today is based on the explosion energy. That's why the petrol is too expensive.
In contrast, implosion energy, like solar panels and wind power, is clean and renewable. We are beginning to realize that we need sustainable energy.
Implosion energy, very simple. All what you need is the beam of the sun on a running water. Not just running in a straight line, but in a zigzag. And that's, you find all the tunnels are in a zigzag form for such a purpose.
In addition to the limestone aquifers underneath the pyramids, there is evidence of a network of man-made tunnels. We have seen concrete evidence of high-level technology with laser-cut crystals, polished black basalt floors, and curious and sophisticated instruments, including those that generated energy from sound and light. Looking at the old riverbed, it seems clear that the Nile has migrated over time, and that it once flowed to the east of the pyramids. The ancient Egyptians built temples using sacred geometry corresponding to cavities in the human body. They had a profound belief in the significance of the stars and how the patterns of the constellations corresponded to our place in the cosmos.